Welcome back. Now, Novare Holdings is making moves to enter Angola and grow its existing business in Nigeria. The investment firm's property arm, Novare Equity Partners, is eyeing a number of pockets of opportunity in Angola. This while it has commended Nigeria in its efforts to enhance its economic environment. And joining me now to offer us more detail on these expansion plans is the Managing Director for Novare Equity Partners, Derrick Roper. Thank you so much for your time, Derrick. So for those who are unfamiliar, just lay out the landscape for Novare's geographical presence currently and your focus areas in the investment space.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sanati, for the opportunity. We started investing into sub-Saharan Africa around about 2008, and we entered Botswana first back in 2008, and then also Nigeria, investing into a pension fund asset management business in Nigeria. And back then, Africa was, the fastest growing areas in the world. There was a lot of money going into Africa. A lot of companies globally and in South Africa invested into the rest of Africa and expanded, and everyone saw huge opportunities on the African continent. And that's when we started also investing into sub-Saharan Africa. And as of today, we've got a presence in Nigeria, also in Zambia and Lusaka, and also in Mozambique. So those are the countries where we've actively invested in, where we've got sizable teams and offices, and quite a big focus and investment in those different countries.
Well, let's actually delve deeper into Nigeria, because as you mentioned, you also went in when a lot of companies were seeing a lot of opportunity there in Nigeria. We know that a lot of companies have pulled out since then, and even those that are still there are still dealing with the challenges there in Nigeria, including currency devaluation and the like. What has your growth story in Nigeria looked like?
Yeah, Sanati, I think, for me, Nigeria is the China of Africa. It's the country in Africa with the largest population, over 200 million people, and together with that, it's got a huge amount of resources. Together with Angola, the biggest oil producer in Africa, and obviously that presents huge opportunities. So, to this day, we still believe that, you can't ignore Nigeria if you want to do business in Africa. It's like ignoring China, from an Africa perspective. And yes, you're right, it has been a challenging time for a lot of people. But, people always say, it's been challenging, but sometimes if you look at other countries outside of Africa, if I look at Turkey, for instance, Turkey's currency has even weakened more than the Naira over the last 3 years, and there's huge inflation, and then if we look at even China, that's gone through a very, very difficult time recently, with a lot of people say you can't invest in that. But it's still, in the long run, Turkey is still a great country, it still presents huge opportunities in the long run, and so is China, So that's the way we look at it. We still believe that Nigeria is a huge opportunity, and we believe that in the long run, you will do very well to invest in Nigeria. But it's like any market, that it's different to your own home market. You need to be on the ground, you need to understand the market, and you need to have a long-term view on these different markets. And even in Africa, it's not just Nigeria that has struggled. From Egypt to the north, to South Africa in the south, to Ghana in the west, to Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia in the east. There's not one country that has not suffered over the last 4 or 5 years in Africa.
Yeah. Well, talking about suffering, of course, we know that your plans to expand to Angola were disrupted by COVID-19. Talk to me about the timing now. It's been 4 years later since the onset of COVID-19. Why the decision to enter now and not maybe sooner after COVID-19?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think after COVID-19, we made a decision to consolidate the countries where we were actually operating in, to make sure that those countries do well. So there was a big focus for us on those three countries and even on South Africa. We just felt that it wasn't the right time after COVID to expand into other countries, and rather to consolidate and focus and make a success of the countries that you are currently in. And yeah, after that, we believe now that Angola presents huge opportunities. It's, as I mentioned earlier, with Nigeria, the biggest oil producer in Africa. It's got huge potential from an agricultural perspective. Yeah, so obviously there's also been political change in Angola. Back in 2017, we believe that the new government has made very positive changes. And it's unbelievable if you look at Africa and other countries, the impact that changes in government has had. If you look at Zambia, when they had a new president elected in a party, you saw massive changes. Even in Nigeria recently, with a new president coming in, making changes, and that's also what happened in Angola. So yeah, obviously, change from a government perspective, often creates opportunity and make it more attractive for investors to invest in. I also think another point that I think is a huge benefit, for Africa going forward is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that's moving ahead. I think that's going to create many opportunities in Africa to do business and make it easier, to trade. So I think that's also why we're very positive on sub-Saharan Africa and specifically Angola.
Well, actually, just with Angola, it is a completely new market. How smooth or bumpy do you expect the road of getting established in Angola to be?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, when we were looking at Angola 5 years ago, those were big obstacles, challenging to get visas, challenging to travel around, challenging to start businesses there. You had to have partners, in a number of different things. However, over the last few years, a lot of those has changed, so it's been made a lot more easier to do business there. We've also seen a lot more international companies entering Angola. We've seen huge amount of investments from, people like Europe, the USA and other investors. And yeah, I think that's just made it a lot easier to establish there and to do business in Angola.
Yeah, and also really quite interesting to see what political and economic reforms can do for the appeal of investors into those countries. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights there, Derrick. Really appreciate it. That was Managing Director for Novare Equity Partners, Derrick Roper.